A little later this month, the Chainsaw Man movie is going to premiere in Japanese theaters. Covering the Rize arc, we're finally getting the long-awaited continuation to the hyper-violent, devil-hunting action series that basically blew down the doors the moment its first season released in late 2022. Fans have been waiting a long time for this, and while it's good that the movie is actually coming out, when I look at how long it took, it does make me wonder just how long it might take for the anime to fully adapt what we know now is part 1 of the Chainsaw Man manga. In fact, let's put together a hypothetical timeline here. By the time the Chainsaw Man movie releases, it will have been 3 years since the first season aired. Now, season 2 should be able to cover the rest of part 1 by itself, but will it be another 3 years before we see that second season? Probably not. Movies in general are higher budget and have more effort put into them, so I could see that causing the movie to take longer to produce than episodes of a TV show. Even so, I don't expect a season 2 to come out in 2026, so let's say 2027 as a more optimistic estimate. From there, let's ask another question. How long do we have to wait until part 2 gets adapted? Chainsaw Man's second part already started back in 2022 when it came to the manga. And while nobody's in a real rush, there's certainly an amping anticipation to see all these new storylines in animation. Having said that, we can probably apply another optimistic 2-year estimate, meaning the absolute earliest a part 2 adaptation could come out, in my opinion, is 2029. When you consider that part 2 in the manga could possibly end next year at the latest, we're likely not going to see any of it animated until years after it ends. Now, I assume most of you are hearing this and going, so what? We live in an era where it's pretty common for anime adaptations to come out years after their originals end. Demon Slayer is one of the most popular properties in the world right now, and while the anime is just starting to get to the ending, the manga has already been over for 5 years now. Though, honestly, that probably has more to do with them insisting on adapting so much of it as movies rather than as TV seasons. JoJo's, meanwhile, started in the 80s but never got a proper adaptation until the 2010s, and we're still playing catch-up to this day. It's also not like 3 years is a record-breaking wait between releases either. Konosuba had a gap of 7 years between its second and third season, while The Devil is a Part-Timer had an almost 10-year gap between its first and second seasons. It's not even the longest gap between releases for Mappa as a company. Vinland Saga released its first season in 2019, only following with a second season nearly 4 years later. Having said all that, I think it's also important to note that Chainsaw Man as a property is of a magnitude more popular than a majority of the names I just mentioned, to the point that it's one of very few series that could have easily led a cultural zeitgeist if it was allowed to dominate the conversation. However, with just 12 episodes released covering what I consider to be the weakest section of the story, and only a movie on the way after 3 years of waiting, it never really had a chance to do that. Looking at some of Chainsaw Man's contemporaries, we can see how much better they are at taking advantage of their runaway popularity. Spy Family, for example, burst onto the scene in 2022, and quickly followed up with a second season in 2023. Season 3 lagged behind a bit, only coming out this year in 2025, but it's still a quicker pace overall compared to Chainsaw Man. Another good example is Frieren, which was so outstandingly massive when it came out in late 2023, early 2024, that it toppled the eternal #1 off of my anime list's top anime and has stayed there for almost 2 years. Season 2 has already been announced for 2026, which, while definitely a while away, is still timely enough to cash in on the growing impact the series has been having. This is without even mentioning that Season 1 of Frieren alone probably dwarfs the amount of episodes Chainsaw Man will have overall for Part 1. Now, I have to admit, it's not really that important to me that Chainsaw Man become an epoch-defining hit the way that Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer have. It's just kind of weird to me that it hasn't. It is plenty popular on the manga side. Hell, every new chapter is accompanied by a ridiculous swarm on social media talking about it. So I know it hasn't lost steam there. But I get the feeling that anime-onlys probably regard Chainsaw Man as that really good series that came out a while ago, but it's been a while since I last saw it, and I don't think anyone's been talking about it lately, and maybe there's a movie coming out, but I'm not sure. You know, a series like that. And the only reason I can come up with for that disparity is simply the difference in how much of the story we've gotten. I do think that the reason for the long delays between releases for Chainsaw Man is because of Mappa stretching themselves thin doing a whole bunch of projects at once. I touched on this a bit in my video about too much anime and how I felt like instead of trying to do all of these different projects, Mappa would be better served focusing up on a few major series instead. To me, that's the most strategic choice. And I bet you most other studios, if they'd had the chance to work on a property like Chainsaw Man, would have probably done the same. Having said all that, I'm not saying that Mappa should be abandoning their lower profile projects to focus on the bigger fish. Shows like Lazarus and Zenshu may not have made the biggest splash this year, but they definitely have their fans. And I myself am highly anticipating the next season of their Ranma 1/2 remake, so it's clear that dipping their hands into multiple projects is working out for them. At the same time, I can't help but occasionally wonder if this is biting into Chainsaw Man's production somewhat. But hey, what do I know? Maybe the reason why the Chainsaw Man anime adaptation is taking so long is because they really want to make sure it looks amazing without having to burn out their animators. Quality control takes time, especially if they're trying to do the series justice, and rushing the project for the sake of cashing in on temporary popularity is a pretty lame mindset, especially if you're in it for the artistry rather than the money. Honestly though, maybe that's for the best. I know not everyone loved the way the first season adapted the Chainsaw Man manga, but I personally really liked it. It showed that the people working on it had some kind of vision for the series. And while it's annoying to have to wait so long for more of the adaptation to come out, I've waited longer for worse, and the movie already looks to be an absolute blast. If time and quality control are Mappa's priorities when it comes to Chainsaw Man, then maybe patience is the real virtue here, rather than trying to capitalize on popularity. Thanks for watching. The Chainsaw Man movie is nearly upon us, and I for one am pretty excited. If you guys are excited as I am, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you're looking forward to in the future of Chainsaw Man as well. Subscribe if you want to see more of my videos, and I'll see you next time.